It's been a while since I've made one of these. Back in April, I uploaded a video of my attempt at a Pokemon Gold Nuzlocke, the first in my series of what I'm calling Regionlockes. The idea is to play through every generation of Pokemon and Nuzlocke the games using only Pokemon introduced in that generation. For example, I couldn't use Zubat or Golbat in my Johto-Lock, but I could use Crobat since it was introduced in Gold and Silver. I had a great time playing my Johto-Lock, but it was a bit of a mess. But with that Nuzlocke in the rear view, it's time to move on to my favorite Pokemon game of all time. This is my Pokemon Emerald Hoennlocke. The rules of the Hoennlocke are as follows. For starters, I'll be following hardcore Nuzlocke rules, which means I can only catch the first Pokemon I encounter on a route, and if a Pokemon faints, it's considered dead and unusable for the rest of the run. I do follow the species clause, which lets me keep encountering Pokemon in new areas until I find one from an evolution branch that I haven't captured yet. In addition to this, I can't use any items in battle, my Pokemon can't exceed the level of the next gym leader's ace Pokemon, and most importantly, I can only use Pokemon that were introduced in Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire. Let's see what I did in my Hoennlocke challenge. I begin my journey by picking the best starter Pokemon of all time, Mudkip. After using it to save the professor's life from a level 2 Pooch, I name my bashful new friend Hydrogen and make my way to Route 101. Here, I get my first encounter of the game, a Wurmple I named Helium. I don't know who will evolve into yet, but either evolution will be helpful later on. Our next encounter is a Poochyena of my own on Route 103. I name the little guy Lithium, and move on to Route 102 where I encounter a Ralts. I wish that was the case, but honestly, Beryllium the Lotad is another great option, especially given its sassy nature to buff its special defense. At this point, before moving on to the next area, I did some switch training on Helium to check its evolution path. Helium evolves into a Silcoon, which means I'll already have Flying type Stab to do with Brawly later on. Next up on Route 104 is unfortunately the wrong encounter, Boron the Wingull. She's not the Pokemon I wanted, but at least she'll be safe in the PC box. Fortunately, I do get the encounter I wanted in the Petalburg Woods, a Taillow named Taillow. Yeah, just like in the Johto-Lock, I once again forgot to name a Pokemon. But I'll still refer to Taillow as Carbon, which is fitting since Carbon is going to be as important to my team as the element that she's named after. My last two encounters before the first gym are Nitrogen the Whismur and Oxygen the Nincada. I don't plan on using either of them, but it's better to have them available just in case. It's also worth pointing out that this is technically a vanilla Nuzlocke up until you beat Roxanne, because the only Pokemon available in these early routes of Emerald are Pokemon that are introduced in Ruby and Sapphire. After getting all my encounters and training up my Pokemon, I finally take on the first gym leader, Roxanne. I start off the battle with Hydrogen, who easily washes away Roxanne's two Geodudes with one water gun apiece. Roxanne's last Pokemon is Nosepass. She's bulkier than the Geodudes on the special side and only normally weak to water and grass, so there's no more one-shots here. Roxanne usually goes for Rock Tomb to lower your speed, and I use that opportunity to use two Mud Slaps, dealing some chip damage and lowering Nosepass's accuracy. At this point, I knew that Nosepass could potentially use Block, and I didn't want Hydrogen stuck in a position where a critical hit could KO it, so I decided to make the switch into Beryllium. Just as Roxanne goes for the block. Gotta say, I'm proud of myself for that perfect play. Beryllium also has a better matchup into Nosepass as it has a higher defense stat than Hydrogen, so he shrugs off Rock Tomb on the next turn. After this, the battle is pretty uneventful. Roxanne uses two potions to help keep Nosepass alive, but between the tackle misses and all my absorbs, Beryllium stays at max HP and takes the win after some bullet seeds, one badge down. After finishing some errands around Rustboro City, I move on to Duford Town. My first stop is the Granite Cave, where I get my next encounter, an Aron named Florine. Aron is a Pokemon that I love using in Hoenn, so I'm really excited about this encounter, but I'm not very happy about its timid nature. One of the nice things about Gen 3 Hoenn is that you can actually skip Duford and go straight to Slateport City. By doing this, you can actually get your Route 110 encounter, an Electrike named Neon. Another fitting name for my new Pokemon. But there's no more encounters to get, so it's back to Duford Town to take on Brawly. Keep in mind that I mentioned earlier that I do have some really good Pokemon for taking on fighting types, so luckily this fight wasn't much of a challenge. Brawly starts with his Machop, and I send out Hydrogen again. I go for a Stab Mudshot, which takes Machop down to just under half HP. But Machop goes for a Bulk Up, so I follow up with Water Gun, leaving Machop alive in the red. Hydrogen does take some karate chops since he didn't pick up the KO right away, but still takes down Machop with 2 Mudshots and heals a bit of HP with an Orange Berry. Brawly's second Pokemon is Tate. I know that Tate is likely to go for a Focus Punch, so I just keep Hydrogen in for yet another Mudshot with the goal of decreasing Tate's speed. This causes Brawly to heal Tate, which is meaningless as Hydrogen takes it out with a Water Gun and Mudshot combo. Last up is Makuhita. I switch into Helium as Makuhita goes for a Bulk Up, but since Helium has a quad resistance to fighting, I'm really not afraid of Makuhita getting stat buffs. He uses a second Bulk Up after I hit a Gust, and I switch to Absorb, trying not to do too much damage since Makuhita has Reversal. But even at +2 attack, Makuhita's Vital Throws do pitiful damage to Helium, who keeps chipping and healing with Absorbs. Eventually, Makuhita does go for that Reversal I was afraid of, but Helium shrugs that one off too. One final Gust takes down Makuhita and easily gives me my second badge. Our next major battle in this run is every speedrunner's nightmare, May 2. But this isn't a speedrun, and I have flying types, so the fight is really easy. After making it to Mauville, I go west to get my next encounter, a Nulimise. I end up not nicknaming it, but that's okay since I'm never going to use it. After quickly beating Wally, I face the next gym leader Wattson, an electric type trainer. He leads off with Voltorb, and I of course start with Hydrogen. But rather than go for a stab Mudshot, I instead switch directly into Flooring the Aeron, hoping to avoid taking damage from a self-destruct. But Voltorb uses Rollout instead, which isn't very good into an Aeron either. I start using Mud Slaps to lower Voltorb's accuracy and do some chip damage, causing his Rollout to eventually miss. Once it does, I switch to Hydrogen anticipating Shockwave, which can't miss. Instead, Voltorb unfortunately goes for that self-destruct, which does absolutely nothing thanks to those Mud Slaps. I feel really bad for that Voltorb now. Up next are Electrike and Magneton, but both of them go down to a single Mudshot each. So last up is Manectric, who can only use Howl and Quick Attack against Hydrogen. Manectric does survive Mudshot, but it just doesn't matter. Hydrogen barely takes damage from the Quick Attacks, and even healing from a Citrus Berry and Super Potions aren't enough to keep Manectric in the fight. That's 3 badges down. So now I'm on my way to Lava Ridge, and I still have 0 deaths. I'm feeling pretty good about this one. My next stream ends up being a short one, with me just making my way to Fall Arbor Town first. On my way there, I get 2 more encounters. My encounter on Route 112 is guaranteed to be a Numel, who I name Sodium. After that is a Spinda on Route 112 named Magnesium. After passing through Fall Arbor Town, the next encounter is a Swablu named Aluminum. Unfortunately, I didn't get any new encounters in the Fiery Path, as Torkoal is the only Pokemon I can get there and it just never showed up. So with all of my captures done for this segment, I take the cable car up to Mount Chimney so I can take on Team Magma. Here, I take on the Team Magma leader, Maxie, for the first time. The fight goes extremely well, and I'm actually not being sarcastic for once when I say that. Carbon struggled against Mighty Yenna due to Intimidate a little bit, but the rest of the fight was completely one-sided. This could be because I actually EV trained Beryllium, Neon, and Sodium into special attack against Spinda's off-screen, which makes Neon especially a big threat for the rest of this run. On my way down the volcano, I encounter a Spoink which I catch and give the name Silicon. Then in the Fiery Path, I finally encounter a Torkoal which gets the name Phosphorus. Better late than never, I suppose. I've also never used a Torkoal in a Gen 3 run before, so this is an exciting opportunity for me to mimic a childhood hero. Now, remember when I said I didn't have any deaths so far? Yeah, sadly, Aluminum died in a bad training accident. I tried running from a Seviper since I didn't want its EVs and failed to run, leading to a one-shot from a Poison Tail crit. Rest in peace, Aluminum. After some more training without any mishaps, it's time to take on Flannery. Just like in the previous gym, Hydrogen is going to be my ace here, and I lead off with him against Flannery's Numel. The worst case scenario here would be Numel setting up a sunny day, but a single water gun is enough to take it out. Next up is Slugma, who of course goes down to a single Mudshot. Flannery's third Pokemon is Camerupt. Although it's 4 times effective, Water Gun doesn't do enough damage for the KO, but Camerupt just goes for a weak tackle, letting Hydrogen use a second Water Gun to take it out. Last up is Flannery's ace Pokemon, Torkoal, and this thing is an absolute menace. It has a held White Herb, which means it can use full power overheats twice in a single battle. Plus, it can set up Sunny Day, which effectively takes away Hydrogen's fire resistance. On the first turn, Torkoal uses Attract, and Hydrogen gets a bit of damage with a Mud Shot. I decide to switch into Sodium here as Torkoal sets up Sunny Day. Now I'm terrified of Overheat and mentally preparing for a potential required sacrifice. But I know it's possible for Sodium to potentially get a KO with a good enough magnitude. I go for it, and roll an 8. A big number, just not enough to pick up the KO. This lets Flannery heal her Torkoal to full HP with a Hyper Potion. After the heal, Sodium gets a magnitude 6 to get Torkoal down to 3/4 of HP. I figured that the best Pokemon to potentially sacrifice here would be Sodium, so I stay in for a third magnitude. I roll a huge magnitude 9, but it just barely misses out on the KO. I'm pretty sure magnitude 10 instead of the 8 or 9 would have won me the battle, but I can't complain about not getting the highest roll on a magnitude. Torkoal retaliates with her first Overheat, taking down Sodium. Thanks for the amazing effort, bud. Since Silicon has a decent special defense stat, I decide to give her a try. Unfortunately, Flannery heals her Torkoal yet again, so it feels like Sodium's death was in vain. Silicon does a little damage with a Psybeam and manages to confuse Torkoal with a Confuse Ray, but it takes a bad body slam after a second Psybeam gets Torkoal down to just under half HP. I don't want to lose Silicon as well, so I decide to switch back into Hydrogen. Things get a little worse as Torkoal goes for a Body Slam, which of course paralyzes Hydrogen. But since the sun is no longer active, I figured I could tank an Overheat, and I stay in. Hydrogen tanks a Body Slam instead, and manages to break through paralysis, letting me hit one last Mud Shot to get the win over Flannery's tough Torkoal. Now that I have 4 gym badges, it's time to make my way back to Petalburg City to take on Norman. But before that, I take a pit stop in the Mirage Tower in the desert to catch my next encounter, a Trapinch named Sulfur. Flygon is my favorite Pokemon of all time, so I'm really excited to have Trapinch on the team. With my desired encounter captured, I took some time to EV train my Pokemon and moved on to face Norman. He leads off with Spinda, and I finally send out someone other than Hydrogen. I start off with a Fake Out to do some chip damage and a fairly weak Bullet Seed. I then go for a Growl to get a safer switch, and Spinda brings Beryllium down to about a half HP. Spinda goes for a Teeter Dance on Neon as I send him out, but Neon breaks through confusion to take the KO with a Spark. Norman's next Pokemon is Vigoroth, so I switch into Fluorine due to its high defense stat and quad resistance to normal moves. Vigoroth starts using Faint Attack instead, which is still resisted, and I go for Rock Smashes, which don't get a defense drop even after 4 uses. But still, I eventually get Vigoroth's HP low enough to take it out with an Iron Tail. Norman then decides to send out his ace Pokemon, Slacking. I didn't want to risk any of my Pokemon on a switch here, so I stayed in with Fluorine, who finally gets a defense drop on a Rock Smash. Sadly, he also gets a crit here, and that leads to Fluorine's death as Slacking hits her back with a counter. Fluorine had really terrible luck in this fight, but the good news is that I can now get a free switch into Phosphorus, who knows the move Protect. This basically means that Slacking is completely incapable of fighting Phosphorus, who protects on its attacking turns, and uses Flamethrower on its loafing turns. I even get the KO by burning Slacking on its last turn. This means that Norman's last Pokemon is Linoone. This thing can sweep teams by using Belly Drum, or it can just get knocked out by a Flamethrower immediately after it uses Belly Drum. That's an option too, I suppose. And it's also 5 badges down for me. With Norman defeated, I get access to Surf, letting me reach the eastern half of Hoenn. On my way to Fortree City, I rescue the Weather Institute employees from Team Aqua, and they gift me Chlorine to Cast Form for helping them. Afterwards, I actually backtracked to Mauville so that I could take on the Windstreet family to get the Macho Brace. I've been doing a lot of EV training, and Macho Brace helps speed up that process. But you know what else speeds up EV training? We do have to be careful now though, because... Wait a sec. Y'all seeing what I'm seeing on my screen right now? Do you guys see this? Do you see what's on the bottom left of my screen right now? Y'all, my Pokemon have Pokerus. I have no idea when it happened, but I apparently ended up getting Pokerus on my Pokemon during this run. It had to have been recently because I don't remember seeing it before I fought against Norman. Honestly, it probably ended up happening because of how much I complained about my lack of EVs in my Jodolock. After getting to Fortree City, I tried to catch an Absol on Route 120, but I ended up running away from it since it used 3 Swords Dances in my catch attempt. No point in risking any of my current team members for an Absol. I did, however, capture a Shuppet on Route 121, which I give the nickname Argon. We've gotten through 18 elements already. I don't feel the need to go for any other encounters, especially since I'm feeling pretty confident in my team's ability to fight Winona. Before taking her on, I intentionally let Cavern get poisoned against wild Pokemon, which will make sense very soon. The battle starts and Winona sends out a Swablu. With all the special attack EVs it's gotten, Neon easily takes it out with a single spark. Winona's next Pokemon is her ace, Altaria. I know it has access to Earthquake, which would probably one-shot Neon, but I also know that Altaria loves to use Dragon Dance first to increase its speed. So, as Altaria uses its Dragon Dance, I switch into Cavern. And to quote the most quotable movie ever,
"This is where the fun begins."
With its Guts ability, Cavern's attack stat is increased while it's affected by status conditions such as poison. Cavern also has the move Facade, which Papa Norman so generously gave me for beating him, which both gets stab and doubles in damage when the user is affected by a status condition. This is why I intentionally poisoned Cavern, and the strategy works to perfection, getting one-shot knockouts on Altaria, Tropius, and Pelipper. Winona's last Pokemon is Skarmory, so I do need to switch out Cavern, but Phosphorus is of course able to take Skarmory down with no issues. This was by far the most one-sided gym battle in my entire run. After dismantling Winona's team, I moved on to Mount Pyre, where I faced my greatest fear in a Nuzlocke, a trainer with a Wobbuffet. This could easily cost me Hydrogen, which would be a massive loss in this run. But luckily, the AI in these games does not make good decisions, and the Wobbuffet kept trying to go for the counter against Hydrogen's water guns. And as a reward for overcoming that challenge, Hydrogen gets to evolve into a Swampert. While in Mount Pyre, I also catch my next encounter, a Duskull named Potassium. It's pretty cool that you can catch both Shuppet and Duskull in Emerald, and I plan on using them both in this run. Before moving on to Mossdeep City, I need to battle Maxie in Team Magma's base, which ends up being a bit tense. The only issue here is Crobat, who moves before Neon and confuses him, causing Neon to hit itself and fail to end the battle right there. I switch into Phosphorus here, who takes bites decently enough and hits back with strong flamethrowers. Since Crobat has only a sliver of health left and Phosphorus is one hit from death, I decided to switch into Beryllium here, which was a big mistake. Crobat goes for a super effective Air Cutter, but luckily, Beryllium lives. This lets me finish off the battle with a Fake Out. My next destination is the Aqua Hideout, but there's no big fights here to worry about. After that though, I make my way to Mossdeep City and take the immediate detour to Shoal Cave for my next encounter, Calcium, the friend-shaped Spheal. She's such an adorable little circle. But with that being my only encounter that I go for here, it's time to take on Tate and Liza. The twins lead with Claydol and Xatu in Emerald, as Potassium makes its debut alongside Beryllium. Potassium is EV trained in special defense, so he'll be a good tank in this fight. I start off with a Fake Out against Claydol, which lets Xatu set up a Calm Mind, and then take a good chunk of damage from Shadow Punch. On the next turn, Xatu starts using Confuse Ray, and Claydol does decent damage with Earthquake. For some reason, I decided to use Shadow Punch on Claydol instead of taking the KO on Xatu here, but this means both of them are under half HP now. Since Beryllium is confused, I decide to switch into Sulfur, who is immediately taken out by a Psychic from Xatu, which means I never get the chance to use my favorite Pokemon in this Nuzlocke. I send out Hydrogen next so he can start using Muddy Waters and pick up that KO on Xatu. Tate and Liza send out Lunatone next as Potassium heals with a held Citrus Berry. For some reason, I haven't quite recognized that Claydol is doing way too much damage with Earthquakes and decide to target Lunatone with Shadow Punch. But since I don't want to risk losing Carbon or Neon the way I lost Sulfur, I keep Potassium in. Fortunately, Claydol gets healed by a Hyper Potion and Lunatone misses a Psychic, letting Potassium take it down. Potassium has done more than enough here, so at this point I let him go down to another Earthquake. In hindsight, Protect would have been a way better move to have instead of Pursuit on Potassium, but truthfully, my only plan for him was to use him in this battle. And his sacrifice does let Beryllium in for free, as Solrock starts to charge a Solar Beam. That's obviously being directed at hydrogen, so I take a free switch into carbon, and finally take down Claydol with a Giga Drain. This gives me my win, since Beryllium Surf takes a KO even after Solrock uses Sunny Day. Now that I have 7 badges, it's time to do the evil team storyline of the game. We can immediately fight Maxie and Tabitha in Mossdeep City, but this fight is a piece of cake with Steven's Metang straight up carrying the fight, taking down several Pokemon on its own. It's nice to have a competent partner for a double battle. And now, since Steven gives you the HM for dive, I can do what I've been waiting for the entire run. Go to the abandoned ship, dive under the sunken part of the ship, and grab this water stone to finally evolve Beryllium into a Ludicolo. With my team fully evolved, I head into the Seafloor Cavern where Archie is trying to revive Kyogre, which he manages to do even after Neon rips his team to shreds. And after getting Rayquaza to break up the second most one-sided Pokemon battle after my Winona fight, all that's left is to take on Gym Leader Juan, which shouldn't be an issue since I have Beryllium and Neon to carry me. I lead with Beryllium, who eliminates Luvdisc and Whiscash with 1 Giga Drain each, and leaves Celio in the red. But since I knew Juan would heal here, a follow-up Surf and Giga Drain combo takes him out too. Great start to this battle, but this causes Juan to send out a big gun, Kingdra, who of course makes the battle go full 180 by using Double Team. Now my moves can miss, and Kingdra heals to full with a Resto Chesto combo. And although Beryllium can tank Kingdra's moves well, he also keeps missing his own moves. I send out Hydrogen next, but he just misses a Mud Shot and hits himself in confusion from a Water Pulse, so he can't stay in any longer. I send out Chlorine next, who can guarantee a hit with Shockwave, but 2 of them leave Kingdra in the red, so I switch into Neon during another heal turn. Neon can 2-shot with Thunderbolt, if the stacked double teams weren't causing me to miss most of my moves. And when I do miss a fatal move, Kingdra just uses Rest again. At this point, only Carbon and his Aerial Ace can save me, so I switch Carbon in and use Aerial Ace for about half damage. With no other options, I go for the second Aerial Ace here. And of course, it barely fails to get the KO. And of course, Kingdra wakes up and takes out Carbon with an Ice Beam. That's a devastating loss, not only because Carbon has been such a crucial team member up until this point, but also because he was my best answer to Wallace's Ludicolo, who's also going to spam Double Team later on. Fortunately, Neon does hit a Thunderbolt right after I lose Carbon, avenging Carbon by massacring both Kingdra and Crawdaunt. That's all 8 badges obtained, but a huge loss to get the last one. All that's left now is to take on the Elite Four. There's no more new encounters, or at least none that I actually plan on using anymore. The rest of the run depends on these 6 Pokemon on the screen. But before taking on the Elite Four, we need to take on Wally, who has a Gardevoir with Double Team. Game Freak really wanted us to hate Gen 3, didn't they? And because of a single Double Team from Gardevoir, Beryllium misses 2 Surfs that would have won that fight and gets taken down by a critical hit Psychic. That's some serious BS, and Neon is also pissed that he needs to avenge another friend. Seriously? Double Team. And now, since I don't have Carbon or Beryllium anymore, I decide to add Oxygen and Argon to the team. Their purpose is to... Honestly, Oxygen is just a mediocre Carbon replacement, and Argon is just here. The other 4 are the major contenders for this championship run. First up is Sydney, the first trainer to be spared from Carbon's wrath had he survived. Naturally, he starts by using Sand Attack, because accuracy and evasion haven't caused me enough issues yet at the end of this Nuzlocke. I planned on Blizzard sweeping him with Chlorine, but I miss every Blizzard due to Sand Attack and have to resort to the much weaker Shockwave. But I eventually take out Mightyena with Phosphorus. His Absol uses Swords Dance as I switch into Hydrogen, which is scary until I see how little damage he does as Hydrogen takes him down. Next, Sydney's Cacturn uses Cotton Spore on a Ninjask, who of course still outspeeds and one-shots it with Aerial Ace. Oxygen doesn't KO Shiftry, but he just uses Double Team. I'm getting real tired of this. Luckily that failed KO was just a low roll, and Oxygen gets the one shot on his next aerial ace. And Neon is an expert Crawdont killer, so let's just move on to the next battle. Phoebe is our second opponent, and she loves making her Dusclops use Protect on the first turn of a battle, giving Oxygen a free turn to use a Swords Dance. And since Oxygen knows Shadow Ball, I take it back. Oxygen is a good carbon replacement. Oxygen is an important and vital element that can both bring life as well as destroy it, and honestly I'm just extending the script so I can actually fit the battle footage in this video. Oxygen literally just sweeps Phoebe's entire team with Shadow Ball after the Swords Dance. Good job, Oxygen. Third is Glacia, so Oxygen won't get a chance to sweep again. Chlorine gets to shine a bit instead, getting to turn into an Ice type when Glacia herself sets up her Hail. He takes out a Celio, and gets Walrein low for Hydrogen to come in and take the KO with a couple of Earthquakes. Next is Glalie, who sets a Light Screen, but still goes down to 2 Phosphorus Flamethrowers. The second Celio comes in and sets up Hail again as Phosphorus chips him with a Body Slam. This lets Chlorine come in on a Mist Blizzard into Hail somehow and deal some damage with a Shockwave. But rather than take the KO here, I, for some reason, switched into Argon for its debut, taking out Celio and the final Glalie with Shadow Balls. Well done, Argon, I guess? Our last Elite Four member is Drake the Dragon Expert. I thought his Shelgon also loves to use Protect on turn 1, so I go for the Hail here and end up taking a Rock Tomb for my troubles. There goes my Blizzard sweep plan. I still take out Shelgon with a Blizzard, and Flygon comes out next. I risk a crit by keeping Chlorine in, but manage to survive a Flamethrower and take down Flygon with a Blizzard. Sorry, Flygon. Next is Salamence, and Chlorine can't take any more hits, so I switch into Hydrogen, who tanks Dragon Claws pretty well, but doesn't really hit any harder with Strength. Sadly, I eventually do need to make a sacrifice, and since Argon was just here to be here, I decided it's best for Argon to go down. But the free switch into Neon lets him avenge yet another teammate. Neon also takes down Drake's Dancing Altaria, who forgot it has attacking moves in its move pool. And last up is Kingdra, who can't beat Neon with its Surf, letting Neon take it out with 2 Thunderbolts. Against all odds, I've made it to the finale. I'm down to 5 Pokemon, but feeling pretty confident in my Neon's ability to win this battle. Sorry, I meant my team's ability to win. Champion Wallace sends out his Wailord first, and I of course lead with Neon, who immediately takes it out with a Thunderbolt. He then takes out Gyarados with a Thunderbolt as well. Special thanks to all the Spinda Neon murdered back on Route 112 for all the special attack EVs. Third up is Whiscash, and I really wish Cash I had Beryllium for this. Luckily, we have the better water ground type on our team, and Hydrogen does take Whiscash down even after tanking a Hyper Beam. But now, the Pokemon I fear most makes its appearance, Ludicolo. I can't let Hydrogen take a Giga Drain here, but I do have an easy switch into Oxygen, my intended double team Colo counter. I use Swords Dance here, survive a pretty strong Surf, and take down Ludicolo with 1 Aerial Ace. The worst is now behind me, but the fight still continues. Next up, Wallace sends out his Ace Melodic, and seeing as Oxygen has done more than its intended purpose, I have him bring her down to below half HP with an Aerial Ace, and sacrifice him to the following Ice Beam. This however gives me a free switch into Neon, who's getting sick and tired of coming in after his friends die. After avenging Oxygen, Neon takes on the final Pokemon Tentacruel, recovering from his Toxic with a held Cherry Berry, and finishing him off with a Thunderbolt, and a Dunder just in case Wallace kept trying to heal, making me the new Hoenn champion. That was quite the Elite Four run. Despite having 2 of my key team members missing, I managed to make my way through and finish this Hoenlocke on my very first attempt. It feels good to achieve victory, especially after the weird situation I had to deal with in my Jodolock. That being said, my Hoenn Nuzlocke technically didn't end here, as there's one other champion you could fight in Hoenn. If you want to see my battle against Steven with this Pokemon team, make sure to give this video a like. If it gets to 100 likes, I'll make a video all about my battle against Steven at the end of Pokemon Emerald. And if you want to see more Regionlockes in the future, make sure to subscribe to my channel as well. I'm looking forward to the Sinnohlocke, even though I am terrified of Cynthia. And as always, thanks for watching.